Hello, Telvanni here, and today I'd like to share with you my second map science experiment and Atlas strategy of 3.18 Sentinel League. In this video, we'll be taking a look at another old favorite of mine, Breach, as I believe there is some huge potential for comboing Pandemonium Sentinels with all of the monsters that spawn from Breach. And to make things even crazier, we'll also be taking a look at another crowd favorite, Delirium. But first things first, if you're liking my videos and you want to see more content from me in the future, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, as it does help out considerably. Alright, so let's go ahead and start breaking down this Atlas strategy. When selecting our map, we wanted one that was pretty open, as Breach needs very wide open spaces for us to get the most out of them. Also, as I am playing Lightning Strike, the map needed to be fairly flat, so things like shore and dunes, while very open, were out, as they both have quite a bit of uneven terrain. I was also looking for a map with a good Divination card. If possible, I think you should always try to run a map with at least one profitable Divination card, as this can easily add several chaos value, on average, to your maps. Cemetery is a pretty common one. However, I had just done a large Legion test on Cemetery, which, if you haven't seen yet, I'd recommend giving it a watch. So at this point, I was hoping for a change of scenery. Also, Cemetery has both ruined buildings and giant holes in the ground that could potentially be quite annoying for Breach. So I've opted to run Tropical Island for this test. It has a great Divination card in the form of the Scout, of which 8 can be exchanged for 7 Exalted Orbs. The map is wide open for the most part, lending itself well to Breach, and it is quite linear, which will be great for Delirium. Alright, so we've got our 48 maps here, and I've gone ahead and chiseled and elked them. I've re-rolled any annoying mods off of them, mostly because I am still trying to level, although I said that last time and still got clapped, so we'll have to wait and see if I can manage to gain some XP this time around. For our Scarabs, we are running Gilded Breach, as this will guarantee 3 additional breaches every map. This synergizes incredibly well with our Sextants, which we'll go over in a minute here. For a Breach strategy, Scarabs far outweigh any benefits we might obtain from running Stream of Consciousness. Next, we are running Polished Harbinger Scarabs. Harbinger is quite a fast mechanic and spawns quite a few monsters. This is ideal for Delirium. For our third Scarab, we are running Polished Elder. These add a bunch of influence mobs to our maps, increasing our rewards from Delirium and Sentinel. I was going to run Rusted Elder Scarabs, however, at the time I was trying to buy Scarabs, Polished Elder Scarabs were actually cheaper than Rusted. Finally, we will be running Rusted Divination Scarabs. The price of these have gone up since our last test, so it should be interesting to see if they're still worth running at that price point, and if farming for a far more common card, like the Scout, versus the Brother Stash, yields better or worse results. Next up, we have our Sextants. First off, we are running Breaches in area belong to Chayula. These are absolutely essential to any Breach strategy, as they allow us to capitalize on the most valuable Breach stone type, turning all of our added breaches into Chayula. For our second Sextant, we are running Additional Breach. These were incredibly cheap, at only 1 chaos per charge, and will give us another breach in our maps. Thirdly, we will be running Areas Contain a Mirror of Delirium. We could have taken this on the map device, however, it costs 16 chaos per map to run Delirium through Kirak, while, at the time of the recording, it was only 5 chaos per map to run Delirium through Sextants. Finally, we are running Harbinger Sextants. These will give us an additional Harbinger at the end of our map, and cause all of the Harbingers in our map to potentially drop better shard types, like Exalted or Mirror Shards. Alright, next, let's take a look at our Atlas passive tree. I'd like to start off by saying, with how much flexibility there is in the Atlas tree, I'm sure there are a number of variations out there that may be equally as valid. However, for this test, I was trying to maximize returns from Delirium and Breach, without adding too many other time-consuming mechanics, as I know the last time I tried to run a Breach strategy, the maps were 15 minutes long. At the bottom of the tree, we are taking these nodes here. This will give us a chance for Alva missions on map completion. Alva would probably be worth running on these maps, as it would boost the number of monsters and Delirium rewards we receive. If you've got a lot of Alva missions saved up like I do, I think you should probably be throwing these on your Delirium maps. However, for the sake of this test, and my sanity, I have decided to forego actively running Alva. Moving on from these Alva nodes, we are blocking all mechanics apart from Breach, Delirium, and Heist. Coming down here, we are pathing through these Breach nodes. Honestly, I've always found these nodes fairly underwhelming. However, it does give us 16% more magic monsters from Breaches, which should synergize well with our Pandemonium Sentinels. It also grants us a chance for additional Breaches, which between that and the blocking we have done, should give us about a 1 in 4 chance to have another free Breach in our maps. Finally, it also gives us a 30% increased quantity of splinters from clasped hands, which in my previous tests was where a large portion of our splinters were coming from. And I guess it also gives us a chance to spawn Zeshtula, but that's kind of a garbage mechanic, so I forget it's even there most of the time. Pathing up here, we are grabbing Shrines and Harbingers, branching out here to grab more Breach chance and Breach nodes. Backtracking over here, we are grabbing further Harbinger nodes, and coming up to the middle of the tree, we are grabbing Breach, Shrine, Harbinger, and all the quantity we can. Coming back this way, we are grabbing Eater of World nodes here, and this wheel of Breach nodes. We then do this annoying loop around the top of the tree to pick up as much 2% increased effective modifier nodes as we can, which will go a long way to buff both Delirium and beyond, which we are picking up over here. I'm not grabbing either of the Ichor Keystone nodes this time around, as with Tropical Island, we will be unable to rush to the boss to kill him first. And as we are doing Delirium, I didn't want to make the maps too ridiculously difficult, but we are still running Eater of World influence for added monster packs. Taking a look at our expenses here, we bought 48 Tropical Islands for 5 Chaos each. We spent 15 Chaos on Chisels and 7 Chaos on Elks. I then spent around 25 Chaos worth of Elks and Scours to reroll some of the maps to be friendlier towards my XP bar. Again, we'll have to wait and see how that one turns out, as last time it didn't go so well. But hey, I'm running a little bit of Magic Find gear, so that's kind of on me. Our Gilded Breach Scarabs we bought for 5.5 Chaos each. Polished Harbingers a little under 5 Chaos each. Polished Elder were just shy of 2 Chaos each. And Rusted Divination Scarabs were exactly 2 C each. We spent almost 400 Chaos on Chayula Sextants at around 8 Chaos per charge. Our Breach Sextants were only 1 Chaos per charge, clocking in at a reasonable 48 Chaos total. 4 charged Delirium Sextants were 20 Chaos each, for another 240 Chaos, and Harbinger Sextants totaled 120 Chaos. Finally, we will also be running Kirax Breachcraft on our maps, for an additional 2 Chaos per map, or 96 Chaos total. This brings our total expenses to 1,857 Chaos, or around 10.8 Exalts at the current exchange rates. Going into this, I know for a fact that we will make some profit. However, I'm looking forward to see just how much that will be, and if it will be able to compete with our Legion Cemetery strategy. But, as I'm recording this portion of the video before having run the maps, we'll have to wait and see. I'm going to get to work blasting these maps, and I'll see you on the flip side. Hello again. I've run a few maps now, and I wanted to go over a few things. First off, I'm running the same partial Magic Find setup from the last video. Although honestly, I am considering dropping it, as fitting in Magic Find on any build is a good idea, only as long as you are not sacrificing damage or clear speed. And my goodness, these maps can get pretty intense. Especially when all of your breaches spawn in the second half of the map deep inside Delirium, and then on top of all of that, you are popping off your Pandemonium Sentinel. After running the first map, I actually went out and bought a better claw and a couple of other upgrades to boost my damage output. And while I didn't die, I did find a way to squeeze in a Cast on Death portal setup. Just in case something unforeseen happens, you don't want to be portaling in at the very beginning of the map and losing your Delirium Mirror. And look, I know it's been talked to death, but running this map was the saddest I've been all League, because of the current state of Headhunter. It just felt so bad, running Juicy beyond Delirium, and Headhunter is definitely no longer the carry item that it used to be. All in all, I don't think I'd recommend this exact strategy without a fairly strong build. However, that doesn't mean the takeaways from the strategy can't be applied to lower budget characters. While a combination of deep Delirium and Breaches can get a little sketchy, if you were to drop the Delirium portion of the strategy, the Breach and Sentinel combo should still work extremely well and be quite manageable. Also, a good option for a budget Lightning Strike Raider would be to drop the Harbinger Sextant and run a Vol Skill Sextant instead, allowing you basically infinite Vol Lightning Strikes. This brings me to the next point I'd like to make, which is that I wholeheartedly recommend Lightning Strike Raider while running a Breach Sentinel strategy. I've got a few build and guides on my channel if you do decide to go that route, but the tankiness of the build and the permanent phasing is an absolute dream. And because we use a life on hit claw, you can keep your health pool topped up while waiting for the breach to grow and while you're popping off your Pandemonium Sentinel. All you need to do is use Whirling Blades inside of a pack, and this will allow you to stay alive without ruining your Sentinel combo by killing everything on the screen with Lightning Strike. Let's jump in game here so you can see exactly what I mean. So we pop the breach, we do a little dance near the middle, keeping our flasks up, and using Whirling Blades a little bit, and once the breach has grown quite a bit, bam, we pop off our Sentinel and our Vol Lightning Strike, and sit back and watch the loot explosions. Okay, I've just finished running all 48 of our maps, and man, I have got to say, this is some of the most fun I've had running maps in a long time. The stacking quant from Sentinel, Delirium, Magic Find, and the large amount of magic and rare monsters spawned from Breach, all piling up on top of each other, made for some insane loot explosions. There is one more thing I'd like to mention. Do not use Gloomshrine Pandemonium Sentinels. I wasted several Breach packs trying to use these, as you instantly get the Gloomshrine effect on deployment. However, the Sentinel itself takes 2 to 4 seconds to charge up and fire, in which time it is quite easy for 1 or 2 monsters to have died from your Whirling Blades, which in turn blows up the entire screen of monsters before your Sentinel actually goes off. And you end up with only like 3 empowered mobs. Alright, let's take a quick peek at the results before we take a look at the loot in-game and go over exactly how profitable each piece of this strategy really was. Our total expenses for this test were around 11 Exalted Orbs. However, we made an incredible 78.7x in revenue, or a little over 7 times return on our initial investment. And I've got to say, this result absolutely blew my expectations out of the water. Next, let's jump in game and take a look at what exactly we are including in these calculations, and what we've excluded. Here you can see our Breach tab. We dropped just shy of 41 full Chayula Breach stones during this test. This is almost 1 full stone per map, which is absolutely bonkers, considering we're not using elevated Breach Sextants or Winged Scarabs. We dropped 6 skins of the Loyal running Breach, which range in price from anywhere from 12 to 70C each. We also had 16 Chosen cards, which sell for anywhere from 5 to 10C each in bulk. Finally, we dropped about 100 Chaos worth of random other Breach stones from Zeshtula and Zeshtula clasped hands. Continuing on with Breach, we dropped over 300 Breach rings, or 5 full Grasping Mails. These can be sold in bulk on TFT for 2C per ring, so we actually have close to 4x worth of guaranteed revenue. Alternatively, you could try and gamble, turning them in for 100% global defenses, but generally I prefer the consistent profit of selling them off. Next we have our Harbinger tab. This is worth a nice little chunk of change, but nothing to write home about. However, keep in mind that I have a somewhat strict filter, and block quite a lot of low stack currency shards, as I generally want my clicks and pickups to be valued around at least half a chaos. This means we culled a lot of chaos shards, Harbinger shards, and Horizon shards. Here we have our Delirium tab. We dropped 29.5 simulacrums. This averaged out to be around 185 simulacrum splinters per map. We also dropped a few dozen Delirium orbs. Another thing to keep in mind here is that running Alva, you could potentially expect even more loot per map from Delirium rewards. Next up we have our Scarabs tab. These came from Eldritch Altars as well as Delirium and Sentinel rewards. Moving on we have our Fossils tab. Not a whole lot here, however between Delirium and Sentinel rewards we had enough fossils I thought it would be worth adding into our calculations. Generally, you'll want at least 1x from fossils before you consider selling them, as it's kind of a waste of time to sell them 1 fossil at a time. You're much better off waiting to sell them in bulk via TFT. After that we have our General Loot tab. This includes a lot of things like our favorited maps, of which we dropped 44, not quite sustaining, but coming really close, without any map nodes on the Atlas tree or using cartography scarabs. We also have all of our heist drops. About half of these came from the map naturally, and the other half came from Sentinel rewards. We also have a bunch of general currencies. And as usual, I've gone ahead and converted our lower tier currencies up via the vendor. Here you can see our boss maps and invitations. Without singular focus, we got quite a few more than in our last test. Although, about a third of them came from Sentinel rewards. We also got pretty lucky and dropped a Cortex. Down here you can see that we had 11 raw Exalted Orbs drop during this test, and 9 Scout cards. Now, you might be saying, wow, that is some crazy RNG. However, having run this test, I can tell you it's not as unrealistic as one might think. To the best of my understanding, Sentinel Empowerment increases item quantity on monsters, and more so on rare and magic monsters. Fully juiced Breach spits out a ton of these. So from Sentinel alone, we are getting a huge bonus to quantity. Delirium also adds an inherent quantity modifier to monsters within the Delirium Fog. And then, on top of that, we are running some Magic Find. So with all of this stacking quantity and currency reward types on our Sentinels, you'll be dropping raw exalts like crazy. Now, granted, you might not get quite this lucky, but we'll go over some what-if scenarios in a minute here. Alright, moving on to our excluded loot. We've got all of the unique maps and non-favorited maps that dropped. These don't necessarily have zero value. However, I don't think it's reasonable to sell this stuff one at a time. Eventually, you might have enough bulk to sell off, but I wouldn't include those potential future profits in this test, as I want this test to reflect things you can basically instantly sell for cold hard cash. We're also excluding all of the junk contracts, divination cards, essences, fragments, and oils that dropped. Finally, I've gone ahead and excluded all of the semi-valuable cluster jewels that dropped during this test, as no one wants to be sitting in their hideout for hours, selling off these 7 to 8 chaos clusters. I've picked them up because I may do some harvest in the future to turn them into more valuable clusters. However, in their current state, I wouldn't consider them for liquidation. Next, we actually have an entire second tab of loot that we are excluding. These are all the valuable Sentinels and Power Cores that dropped. I've excluded these from our profits though, as it is expected you will be using them to breed and maintain your own Sentinel collection. However, if you have a large excess of valuable Sentinels, you could always sell them off for even higher profits. Now that we've gone over the loot in-game, let's take another look at our spreadsheet and see how each of these mechanics fared. First off, we had Breach. Between our Sextants, Scarabs, and Kyricraft, we spent around 800 chaos. However, we had over 2,800 chaos worth of Breach items drop, profiting a total of 2,043 chaos, or 42 chaos per map. Breach is definitely worth running in a Delirium or Sentinel strategy, as it adds an insane number of monsters to your map, and even alone, it would be quite profitable, as you can see. The one caveat here is that it requires a very powerful build to handle all three at the same time, as Delirium and Sentinel both make the monsters quite tanky, and as Breach has a timeout mechanic, if you don't have enough damage, you could very well end up losing your Sentinel rewards, if the Breach closes before you can kill the empowered monsters. Next, we were running Harbinger. Was it worth it? Well, as you can see, we made around 368 chaos in profit, or a little bit shy of 8 chaos per map. This is pretty reasonable for the amount of monsters it adds to our Delirium strategy, and how quickly the mechanic is to dispatch. All in all, I'd recommend running Harbinger on most strategies for added juice and monster packs. It's never going to be the most insane amount of profits, but it will basically always give a little bit of return with the potential for big money in the form of a mirror shard. Moving on, we have Delirium. We spent a total of 240 chaos on Delirium Sextants for this test, and brought in a whopping 2,160 chaos worth of simulacrums and Delirium orbs alone, profiting 1,920 chaos or 40 C per map. A couple things to keep in mind here: profit from other reward tiles that Delirium dropped are not factored into these figures, and also the expensive added things used to juice the map, such as Elder Scarabs, are not calculated here either. And in the time it has taken me to complete this test, I believe the price of Delirium Sextants has risen a few chaos per map. However, even with all of those considerations, Delirium is absolutely busted right now, especially with how it interacts with Sentinel. And I would definitely recommend running it, as long as your build can handle it comfortably. And as I've mentioned before, if you've got alpha missions, you should chuck those on for even bigger profits. Finally, were Divination Scarabs worth it? Well, this time around we had 9 scout cards drop. If we assume 3 of these were due to the use of Scarabs, we profited around 355 chaos total, or 7 chaos per map. At the price of 2 chaos per rusted Scarab, these were absolutely worth running. However, keep in mind that we may have gotten slightly lucky in our scout drops, and that if the price of Divination Scarabs continue to rise, it is likely this could reach a point where it is basically break even, or potentially a net loss, especially considering how many people are using Divination Scarabs right now to try and farm apothecary cards. So always try and keep an eye on the market when deciding on what to run in your current Atlas strategy. So to sum things up for you guys, Breach is absolutely insane money right now, even without Delirium, especially when you factor in the added profit from Breach Rings. Harbinger is always a good pick, adding a lot of monsters without adding much time, even if it's not the most profitable thing in the world. Delirium is always a great loot multiplier, assuming your build can handle it without much slowdown. And Divination Scarabs are worth running on maps with good cards, as long as they don't get too expensive. We ended up profiting just shy of 68 exalts in 48 maps, or around 1.4x per map. But maybe you're thinking, there is no way I'm going to get that many exalted orbs, or a Cortex drop. Well, if you come down here, we can remove all of the exalted orbs and the Cortex from our calculations, like this. And you can see we still would have profited 55 exalted orbs in 48 maps. While focused, these maps were taking me around 10 minutes to completely clear out and loot. So at the time of this video, I was making around 8.5 exalts an hour. However, your profits will vary depending on the cost of supplies, what sentinels you are using, how much magic find you can squeeze into your build, and the rate at which you are able to complete maps. All in all, this was some of the most fun mapping I've had in a long time, and I would definitely repeat this strategy again in the future. Anyway, thank you for watching, good luck with your league, and I'll see you in the next one.